All right, get ready for this one because today's deep dive is going to be a wild ride. We're heading up to Vermont, a place you don't usually think of when it comes to border security.
Not exactly the hotbed of drama you'd expect, right?
Exactly. But trust me, this case is anything but ordinary.
Yeah, it really flips the script on how we usually view border security.
It all starts with the death of Border Patrol agent David Maland
Back in January.
during what seemed like, a pretty routine traffic stop.
A routine stop turned deadly.
But the deeper you go, the more you realize this might actually be connected to something much bigger.
A much wider network, potentially.
Exactly, like a hidden web of criminal activity.
And it really throws into question those assumptions we have about where crime actually takes place.
Right, we think border security, we think major crossings, right?
Like usual suspects, yeah.
But this happened in a pretty quiet corner of Vermont.
A sleepy little town, suddenly at the heart of it all.
So it makes you wonder, are we missing something?
Are there vulnerabilities in these, less obvious spots that we haven't even considered?
And as we start to peel back the layers of this, it gets even more interesting. Because Agent Maland wasn't just responding to a simple traffic violation.
It was more than a broken taillight, that's for sure.
He was doing an immigration inspection.
Right, standard procedure.
And the two people in the car, Teresa Youngblut and Felix Bauckholt, were carrying a whole lot of weapons and tactical gear.
More than you'd expect for a casual road trip.
Way more. We're talking a ballistic helmet, night vision, tons of ammunition. It's like they were prepping for a war.
That level of preparedness is definitely a red flag.
So what's the deal with that?
Well, it makes you wonder, were they expecting trouble? Or were they heading to cause some trouble?
Possibly. And then there's the whole issue with the guns.
Oh yeah, those guns.
The guns Youngblut used were traced back to a person of interest in not one, but two murder investigations.
Two. One in Pennsylvania and one all the way in California. Talk about a coincidence.
That's too many connections to be just a fluke. Right. So suddenly, this isn't just a tragic shooting. This is potentially a network of criminals operating across state lines.
Yeah, a whole new level of complexity.
Like a puzzle. And with every piece you find, more questions pop up.
Definitely keeps you on your toes.
Like, remember how early reports said Bauckholt had an expired visa?
Yeah, that was a whole thing.
Well, it turns out that wasn't true at all.
It was a real head-scratcher.
His visa was completely current. So was that a mistake?
Or was there something more to it?
It just adds another layer of weirdness to this whole thing.
It's like every time we think we're getting closer to the truth, another curveball comes flying our way.
To really wrap our heads around what went down, we gotta understand the people involved.
Absolutely. The human element is key.
So let's start with Agent Maland. This guy was more than just an officer. He was a veteran.
Dedicated to serving his country.
Served at the Pentagon on 9/11.
Wow.
Turned down promotion so he could stay in the field.
A true commitment to the job.
Worked with his canine partner.
And he was about to propose to his partner, too.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. It really makes you think about the human cost of these headlines.
The ripple effects that we don't always see.
And then there's Teresa Youngblut, the 21-year-old who fired the first shot.
She's a bit of an enigma.
What was she thinking?
What was her motive?
Why was she traveling with Bauckholt, and where did all those weapons come from?
And how does she tie in with those murder investigations?
It's clear she had some connection to that person of interest.
But the nature of that connection is still hazy.
And here's another chilling detail.
Lay it on me.
Youngblut and Bauckholt were under surveillance by Homeland Security investigations.
They had eyes on them.
For days before the shooting.
So what did they know?
And what were they hoping to find out?
Clearly, they were considered persons of interest.
Makes you think, were they on their way to commit another crime?
Or maybe running from something.
And how does Bauckholt fit into all this with his valid visa?
He's the wild card.
Like a ghost in the story?
Oh, definitely a piece of the puzzle we need to figure out.
There are just so many unanswered questions.
It's what makes this case so captivating and so disturbing.
It really makes you look beyond the surface and think about the realities of border security and law enforcement and the choices people make that lead them down these paths.
The complexities of human nature and the consequences of those choices.
And then there's all that tactical gear they had with them.
Oh, yeah, the gear. That really throws a wrench in things.
It's not just about the guns anymore, it's the whole picture.
Like they were ready for anything.
Exactly. The ballistic helmet, night vision, it's like, what were they expecting?
Were they heading into a situation where they knew things could get messy?
Or were they planning on making things messy?
It's a chilling thought, isn't it? And the fact that they were already being watched by Homeland Security adds another layer of intrigue to the whole thing.
So were the investigators aware of this potential for violence?
What were they hoping to find out by keeping tabs on Youngblut and Bauckholt?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
It is. Were there any warning signs they missed? Or did things escalate more quickly than anyone anticipated?
It's easy to look back in hindsight and say, what if? But law enforcement often operates with limited information.
They're piecing together clues, trying to prevent crimes before they happen.
It makes you wonder, though, if they had uncovered something more concrete.
Could this whole thing have been avoided?
It's a heavy thought.
Yeah.
And speaking of heavy thoughts, the whole Bauckholt visa situation still bugs me.
Yeah, that whole back and forth was confusing.
First, they say it's expired, then it turns out it's valid. It feels like a deliberate smokescreen.
Almost like misdirection.
Right. Was it just a clerical error, or was there something more intentional going on?
It really makes you question what else might have been misreported or misconstrued in this case.
Exactly. And how does a seemingly ordinary guy with a valid visa wind up in the middle of this whole mess?
Right. What was his connection to Youngblut?
Was he a willing participant, or was he somehow manipulated into this?
We need to understand Bauckholt's role in all of this. Was he a victim? Or was he more involved than we initially thought?
We can't just look at the facts and evidence.
The human side of this story is crucial.
We need to consider the motivations, the pressures that led them down this path.
And in the midst of all this intrigue and investigation, we can't forget about the human cost.
Right. Agent Maland's death wasn't just a statistic.
It was a devastating loss for his family, his friends, his entire community.
It's a stark reminder that these incidents have ripple effects,
impacting so many lives.
And it brings us back to that fundamental question. What can we learn from all of this?
How can we prevent similar tragedies from happening in the future?
I think this case forces us to grapple with the realities of law enforcement in a world that's changing so rapidly.
Technology is advancing. The criminal landscape is evolving.
So are our methods keeping pace? Do we need to rethink our strategies when it comes to border security?
Our training, how we allocate resources.
These are tough questions, no doubt.
But they're the questions we need to be asking if we want to make a difference.
We can't afford to be complacent. We owe it to the men and women who risk their lives every day
to ensure their safety,
to give them the tools they need to do their jobs effectively.
And we owe it to ourselves to understand the challenges they face,
to engage in these conversations and try to find solutions.
And speaking of challenges, this case really underscores the dangers that Border Patrol agents face every day.
We tend to focus on the major crossings,
the high-profile areas.
But as we've seen, threats can pop up anywhere.
That's right.
Especially along a border as vast and diverse as our northern border.
Miles and miles of terrain.
Mountains, forests, lakes.
It's a logistical nightmare.
And it creates unique challenges for the agents patrolling these areas.
Absolutely.
So do they have the training, the equipment, the support they need to handle situations like this?
That's a critical question.
And are we doing enough to address the root causes that contribute to these incidents?
Things like cross-border criminal networks, the flow of illegal weapons.
It's about connecting the dots, seeing the bigger picture.
And taking proactive steps to prevent these tragedies before they happen.
It's interesting to think about the role technology plays in all of this.
We have all this surveillance, facial recognition, data analysis.
But are we using it effectively? Are we really leveraging technology to its full potential?
That's a valid point.
Technology can be an incredible asset.
But it's not a magic solution.
We need to be smart about how we use it.
We need to think about the ethical implications.
We need to ensure we're protecting people's privacy and civil liberties.
And we need to remember that technology should enhance human intelligence and decision-making.
Not replace it completely.
It's all about finding the right balance.
It's about humans and technology working together.
And it's about constantly evaluating and adapting.
Because the technological landscape is constantly changing.
We can't just set it and forget it.
We need to be flexible, we need to be innovative.
And we need to stay ahead of the curve.
This case is a prime example of how crime isn't just about individuals acting alone.
It's about networks, connections, relationships.
Often, there's a much larger criminal enterprise at play.
Like a spiderweb, you pull on one thread and the whole thing vibrates.
This highlights the importance of cooperation between agencies.
Sharing information and resources.
Working together to dismantle these organizations that operate across borders.
And this case also really flipped our expectations of what we think of when we hear border security.
It happened in a seemingly peaceful part of Vermont.
Not exactly the front line.
Then the people involved weren't your typical suspects.
It's a reminder that threats can emerge from anywhere.
And that we need to be prepared for anything.
We need a multifaceted approach.
One that goes beyond just enforcement.
We need to address the root causes of crime.
Poverty, lack of opportunity, social instability.
It's about creating a more secure and just society.
Or people aren't driven to criminal activity out of desperation.
That's the ultimate goal.
To create a world where tragedies like this are less likely to occur.
And that starts with education, with fostering understanding, and with having open and honest conversations about the challenges we face as a nation.
It makes you think about the impact on the local community.
Yeah, the ripple effects that reach beyond the immediate event.
I mean, Coventry, Vermont isn't a big city.
This must really shaken things up.
Absolutely. It brings it all home, doesn't it?
It's a stark reminder that these stories,
These headlines.
they have real consequences for real people.
People living their lives.
Going about their routines.
And suddenly everything changes.
Imagine living in a place where something like this happens.
It would completely change your perspective.
On safety, security.
On everyday life.
It really underscores the importance of community.
How people come together.
To support each other.
Rebuild trust.
It's really remarkable, the resilience of the human spirit.
To be able to overcome something like this.
And find a way to move forward.
This case has really opened up a lot of questions, hasn't it?
It's like a Pandora's box.
About border security, law enforcement, even the human condition.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
And we may never have all the answers.
But the exploration itself has been valuable.
We've delved into some really complex issues.
The intricacies of border security.
The challenges faced by law enforcement.
Those criminal networks, how they operate.
The personal stories, too.
The human impact.
We've looked at the role of technology.
The importance of global cooperation.
Trying to find that balance between security and freedom.
It's been eye-opening.
To say the least.
I think we've all gained a deeper understanding.
Of how complex these issues really are.
And how important it is to have these discussions.
To be open to different perspectives.
To really dig deep and try to understand.
We've learned there are no easy answers.
No quick fixes.
No one-size-fits-all solutions.
But what we have found
is hope, resilience,
and a shared desire to make a difference.
To create a safer world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to encourage you to keep exploring these issues, to have those tough conversations,
to advocate for policies that make a difference,
to promote both security and justice.
Because the quest for knowledge and understanding for a more just world.
It's a journey we're all on together.
Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive.